Hello and welcome to Zerocarbonista, Series 6, The Cow in the Room. I'm Ian Collins, and this is your number one go-to environment-based podcast. If it's green, it is in. And Dale, we say this every week. It sounds like something from an old northern sitcom. It's been a heck of a week.
Yeah, by gum it has, isn't it? Again,
by gum.
but it always is. It just always is. I mean, I literally just got here from Glastonbury, and I just got there from London doing the Today Show, and it's just like it's like a blizzard of busyness.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'd imagine quite a lot of what you did on the. I mean, you said Today Show. Can I correct you? It was Any Questions.
Yeah, but they call it that. That's the weird thing. It was
Who
Any
calls
Questions.
it the Today Show?
The people that run the Today Show.
Do they?
Yeah.
You see, that's the BBC. They don't even know what they're working on. They have no idea. But of course, this is the question time, but the radio version, as it were. So right. I'm guessing a lot of what we're going to talk about here will have come up. And should we start with, well, I would imagine some of this might make you uncomfortable. Keir Starmer monkeying around with oil fields, nuclear energy. Rachel Reeves thinks bats and ferrets are twats. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the premise of last night's radio thing was, can we have green and growth, as if there was some kind of competition between the two, like a binary choice or something like that. Yeah. And that covered Rosebank, it covered the third runway at Heathrow and the others. And it didn't cover small nuclear reactors, but that's a story that's only just appeared. And yeah, we did even cover that crazy comment. I think it's a crazy comment anyway by Rachel Reeves that, like, you know, we don't care about bats and newts actually that much. We want growth. And the whole thing appears to be a kind of a presentation by the government to the wider public, to the media for sure, that they're all about growth. They're serious about growth. It's all very business-like. For too long, we've been stopped by newts and bats from being able to build stuff. And this was the conversation last night. I have to say I challenged it because I don't believe it's true. It's not newts and bats that are holding things up. It's actually twats.
Well, there you go. So
in planning, you're kind of right.
I mean, but what is there a kind of... Is there a turn here? Because Starmer is petrified of not being seen as a bloke that, you know, can grow the economy. So as a result, we've had the Heathrow thing, and now we've got this Rosebank potential change of feeling about that. I mean, what's going on there? Because I can't imagine Ed Miliband can stomach too much of this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on. It looks to me like a presentation to the outside world. I do wonder, I think I said on the show, I don't believe the government thinks the Heathrow third runway will go ahead. But it faces fundamental problems. It's interesting because we had an argument amongst the panel about whether or not Heathrow gets us economic growth. And from my perspective, I say it's the wrong kind of growth because even if we get something, it won't be enduring because it's the kind of growth that drives the climate crisis. But there was an economist on the panel. And this part's so funny because the chair took it to him. I'd been saying, look, there's no economic case for Heathrow. And I set out why, like, you know, 3 times as many tourists already leave our country flying than come in and that kind of stuff. So he went to the economist and he said, so Dale says no economic case. What do you say? And I was waiting for, it was a long reply, waiting for some numbers, and no numbers came. And so I had to say at the end, you know, kind of like, you're an economist. Where are the numbers? You haven't put a number on the growth. And I didn't know what he was going to say. He could have come back and said, oh, look, here's the number. And it's a big number. And I could have said, oh, fair enough, you know. He said, well, I don't know. I haven't got a number. And I'm like, what? You're an economist without numbers?
I mean, yeah, an economist without numbers going on a national radio program where he might be asked about the numbers.
Yeah, and I said, you're making the economic case for the Heathrow's third runway, and you haven't got any numbers. It was a very funny moment.
So he hasn't got any numbers for that. What about Rosebank?
So we came to Rosebank, and he said, I haven't got any numbers for you. I said, that's okay. I'll be the numbers guy, because I had some numbers for Rosebank, right? Like £7 billion in subsidies from our government to the Norwegian energy company in order to build this, you know, oil and gas field.
Yeah.
And they will never pay any tax on it here. They're the numbers. We'll get nothing from that. They'll create 2,500 jobs. Only 500 of those are long-term. The other 2,000 are in the construction phase. But even if you assume it's 2,500 jobs, that's £3 million per job. There's no value for money in that. We're paying a foreign company to come here and create jobs at £3 million each, and they won't pay tax here on this oil. So it will never land here or go straight into international markets. And of course, in the teeth of a climate crisis, when we've got to get our carbon emissions down like there's no tomorrow. So none of that makes any sense.
And then we've got nuclear reactors to throw into this, because apparently more nuclear power plants will be approved across England and Wales as the Prime Minister slashes red tape to get Britain building as part of his plan for change. But does that not go against the whole net zero thing as well?
Well, I mean, here's the thing: there's no money in Heathrow's third runway for our country. There's absolutely no money in new oil and gas fields. It's the opposite. It's costing us money. And then you come to small nukes, and the government and the industry consistently say that we'll get lower bills. In this announcement that you just mentioned, they talk about lower bills and that kind of stuff. But they don't put a number on it. Again, they're economists without numbers. They won't tell us how much the energy will cost. When big nuclear is the most expensive electricity that we've ever made, it's off the charts compared to, let's say, renewable energy. And of course, the one thing we all take to be like one of those fundamental laws of physics is that economies of scale come by making something bigger, not by making something smaller. It always costs money to miniaturize. So here they are saying we can miniaturize these nuclear reactors that are famously decades late and billions over budget. If we make smaller versions and spread them around the country, they'll be cheap. I don't believe that for a second. And of course, what we are doing is proliferating the risk of problems. And when I was on the real question time last week, I said in the green room to the other economist actually that I met in the last couple of weeks, I said, for me, nuclear power is like, it's worth imagining, what if the Romans had nuclear power, right? If they did, Bath would be a toxic no-go zone. It's only 2,000 years ago. Sounds like a long time, but not in the context of toxic nuclear waste. Bath, we wouldn't be able to go near it.
Yeah. Well, so what's the downside?
What's the downside of not going near Bath? What do you mean? Well, so hundreds. They're talking about possibly hundreds of these small nuclear reactors dotted around the country. What kind of legacy is that to leave? It's got a toxic half-life of 8,000 years, this stuff. We don't know what to do with it. We've got no containment technology beyond 100 years. And we're talking now about digging enormous holes under the North Sea that you can drive a truck into from land, dump a load of nuclear waste, run out and shut the door behind you. I mean, what kind of legacy is that to leave to a future world?
Which is why we need solar farms, which is why you got a big fat reference in the House of Commons this week, Dale. This is Ed Miliband and the Shadow Energy Secretary. Have a listen.
The Secretary of State recently approved a 524-hectare solar farm in Lincolnshire, a farm linked to Dale Vince, a £5.4 million donor to the Labour Party. The public have a right to be certain that this decision was carried out properly. So, will the Secretary of State refer his conduct of this application to the Independent Advisor on Ministerial Standards? Yes or no?
Secretary of State. Well, I'm glad the Honourable Lady asked about this because I took no part in this decision and recused myself from it. And here we go, Madam Deputy Speaker. You see, they've got nothing to say. They've got nothing to say about the country. Desperate scraping of the barrel. And let the whole House hear it. They oppose a solar plan. They oppose a solar plant that will put up solar panels throughout the country and give clean power to the British people. The state of the Conservative Party, Madam Deputy Speaker, is something to behold.
Now, there's a couple of takeaways from that, Dale. Firstly, Joy Morrissey, who I'd never heard of until seeing this clip, who's an American. I thought she was in the Senate for a second. What's going on? I've never known an American MP before. Is that a bit weird?
I have no idea. And
it's not illegal, by the way. It's fine. It's not like her immigration status is being questioned.
Yeah, just her accent, right? But look,
these characters come out of nowhere that you've never heard of.
I think she was standing in for the actual Shadow Energy Secretary, Claire Coutinho. I think
she was. But nonetheless, she's the Shadow Minister. That's right. Ed Miliband furiously tore into her, and she threw up that same bit of what you'd call fake news about Ed doing you a favour.
Yeah, which is why he tore into her. It was that thing that was doing the rounds last week in the media that I defended against a few times, just explained some, basic facts. Like it'd been in the project itself, a massive solar project, had been in planning for 3 years, largely consented by a Tory regime. was one of 5 big projects consented in Lincolnshire, with 9 more coming. So it's like one of 14 projects will make 10%, power 10% of the homes in Britain between them. And of course, I've been in renewable energy for 30 years. It would be more surprising if I wasn't involved in big solar than the fact that I am. Ed tore into it because he said, you're not even like reading the facts. It made it publicly known already that he recused himself from that decision. He didn't even take that decision. So she was just talking a load of, it's just mudslinging, isn't it? That's what's going on.
As my old nan would say, what a load of old shit. But you're right. It is curious that anybody would look at you and go, oh, what's all this Dale Vincelark doing? You know, investing in energy, wind, solar farms. I mean, a bit weird, isn't it?
That's right.
Not really. I mean, it's the very antitheses of weird. It's kind of what you do, right?
That's right. And this is from the party who, during the pandemic, created a fast lane, a VIP channel for donors and friends of Conservative MPs and the party to go into. People that never dealt in medical supplies in their life were fast-tracked through this channel, allowed to charge 25% more than normal companies. They were setting up companies just for this, just for that purpose, fast-tracked through contracts of hundreds of millions, most of which didn't deliver, or they delivered dodgy stuff. This is the same party that says to Ed Miliband, oh, this bloke that gave money to your party has now got planning permission for a solar farm. There's something wrong with it.
Yeah. Bobby Davro got a face mask contract. I mean, that's how bad it was, you know?
There's somebody in this constituency here that was, his company was virtually bankrupt, and he got a £300 million contract to supply PPE. He'd never been in PPE before in his life.
It's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah. If I missed your Bobby Davro joke, by the way, because I missed a reference then.
Not at all. No, there was no specific reason. I just sort of tried to pluck some kind of character out the air. And I landed on Davro. All roads lead to Davro. Here's an interesting one. A quarter of young people are switching off their fridges to save energy. Is that strictly? I mean, the sentiment might be good, but is that strictly a good idea? Because food could go manky, and then you might die.
Well, I think if you eat meat and dairy, then you're taking a big risk, because the bacteria proliferates in those things at room temperature or anything above being chilled, and I mean that's a serious food safety risk to turn your cooler off for your bacon. But
then you don't want your tomatoes and cucumber to be on the mush, do you?
No, you don't want it on the mush. But the good thing about plants in that environment is they aren't going to kill you.
You're going to kill me?
No, they're not going to kill you.
Plants,
you put plants in the same fridge with I don't know, meat and dairy or whatever it is. You know what I mean? One of them will turn toxic.
Oh, I see. None of them. You see, I heard a kind of Tony Soprano moment there, where I thought you just randomly went, "Now I'm going to kill you."
I wonder why.
Dale, what did I do? I just mentioned cucumbers.
I wonder what
they're a bit weird. But
tomatoes. It was tomatoes, but I wondered why you went so quiet. That explains it. I
was trying to digest the death threat. That's all it was. You've got to reply. This is about government.
Can I just say this? Sorry, can I just say this? This story, bad as it is, I think it was 30% of everybody under 30 is involved in this, turning off their fridge to save power.
Yeah, pretty much.
You've got to say, you look at that and you say, well, how does a national heat pump program make sense alongside the reality that people can't afford to run a fridge? A heat pump is like a fridge on steroids, right?
Yeah.
And if 30% of people under 30 can't run the little version, what are we doing trying to force the big version on them?
I mean, there's another way to look at this, and that's a very good point. But should anyone aged between 16 and 34 be eating anything out of a fridge anyway? You must be eating out of a shop, aren't you? Like a takeaway.
People put old takeaway in fridges too.
But to live on chips, I think that's the general rule. Let's talk about carbon capture, because you've talked about this a lot, and I know that you're not sold on the efficacy of carbon capture. So you wrote a letter to the government.
Oh yeah, to the new man in charge of the new Office for Value for Money. Which I think is a great idea. Let's have an office for value for money. I loved it. As soon as I heard it, I thought, ooh, nuclear power, carbon capture and storage. Let's stick all of these in front of this new department. So I wrote to him a letter saying, look, I don't know what your brief is. Well, congratulations on the job. Don't know what your brief is, but does it cover these things by any chance? Because they really need looking at. And he wrote a long letter explaining who's looking at what and what's doing what. And then at the very end, he said, and I look forward to taking a look at them.
So is that it? Is that the last you will hear?
So far. So it might well be the last
it's
I
a
hear.
great civil servant response, isn't it? Yeah, we'll take it very seriously. Thank you very much. Where's the shredder, Pam? That's often the case.
I mean, value for money for me, right? Here's some bad examples. Carbon capture and storage, we've committed £1 billion in the first year for this Teesside project. It'll create 4,000 jobs. That's £250,000 per job. That's almost 10 years of the national average pay. I want to say any fool can create a job if you're given £250,000 to do it. Rosebank is even worse, £3 million of public money to create every job that Rosebank creates. And, Sizewell, oh my word. Sizewell is now going to cost £40 billion, most expensive energy that we've ever made.
Blimey.
And if you can't look at these, you don't need a microscope, do you, to look at these projects and say, do you know what? There might be a value for money issue in here.
Here's one, Dale. Will UK's AI expansion plans scupper net zero? Because Keir Starmer obviously wants to turn Britain into an artificial intelligence superpower. But there is some expert view that suggests that could undermine some of the country's green goals.
Well, it was one of the arguments for Heathrow, against Heathrow, actually. The NEF published a study, and they said, if we have a new runway at Heathrow, Gatwick and Luton, then we'll wipe out all of the carbon savings of our green energy program. So yes, that will wipe out our net zero ambition. And data centers, more data centers, AI consumption, I mean, it is big, but I'm not convinced it needs to wipe out our net zero ambition, because we can just build more wind and solar power and stuff like that. So, I think there's a way around it. And I think these things will become more efficient as well. So I'm more worried about runways actually killing our net zero than I am about AI.
Let's move then to the questions. This from Julie Dale. We're more than half a year into the Labour government. How do you think they're doing on the cow in the room? What would you like to see them doing? Yeah, let's mark the homework of Keir, shall we?
On the cow in the room in particular? That was the question.
Yeah, specifically on food, that would refer to.
Food, exactly right, yeah. So, I mean, I'm still hoping to have a meeting with people in the Department of Education to talk about, how do you describe it? To talk about changing the law that obliges schools to feed animal products to our kids, to allow schools to choose. Been famously described in right-wing circles as me being trying to take the meat from our children, which is not.
You're the Margaret Thatcher of the meat world.
That's right. So that really, and I'm hoping to have a conversation about the curriculum as well. We've got a great thing called Ministry of Eco-Education as a primary school curriculum entirely themed around sustainability in every topic. And I think it's in use now, wholly or partly, by every primary school in Britain, which is 20,000 of them. And I want to share that with the Department of Education and say, look, I mean, you can have it, or can we work together? How do we take it up to the secondary level, which we've just begun, that kind of stuff. But on the cow in the room, what I really want to see is proper health warnings about these products that we know are dangerous, that kill us, that give us chronic diseases in later life. The scientific certainty is there. The public health advice hasn't followed it. And we do allow advertising of these products that is misleading, and people need to know. So we need some proper public health warnings around meat and dairy products. I'd like to see that. I'm going to hold my breath, though.
And kids can just eat fake chicken nuggets, because that shit just tastes of salt and sugar, right? I mean, it doesn't. I don't think it's got a chickeny thing going on.
No, that's right. I mean, they are ultra high processed. They do come with their own, problems. Whether or not they still cause all the same problems of animal products, I don't know.
Here's a question from Rob Dale. I've just seen a Telegraph article online stating that you've had to scrap the first gas mill at Reading, resulting in the company posting a loss. What is the situation with gas now? Is it too technically difficult, or are these just teething issues that would be expected for this type of technology? I know you had high hopes for grass gas, and as a long-standing Ecotricity customer, I did too.
Yeah, so firstly, I want to make a joke about the fact that there was one Telegraph article about me in the last week, but there were 6.
Yeah, what? This is bad. You had 5 the week before. You've gone down to 1.
And
the hell have you done, Dale?
So I just want to say, look, there were 6 stories about me last week, Robin. You only found 1. I'm kind of like, you're a regular reader or not. I don't know. But look, that's my joke. Green gas, I thought we talked about it last week. We have had problems at our pilot project in Reading, and we have closed it down so that we can rebuild it. What we found is that 100% grass, never been done before. is a problem because it's a bit fibrous, and we've got basically, if you can imagine, like hairballs, fur balls building up inside our digesters. So we need a different process. We need some pre-treatment for the grass. We're working on that. We're going to bring it back online later this year in a mixed feedstock sense, some more traditional, some grass, some other stuff. And then we're going to ramp it up to 100% over the next 12 months. So it hasn't gone away. Still very much believe in it. It's very much doable and linked for us into our food project as well, because before we put the grass in the machine to make the gas, we're going to take out protein, omega oils, and B vitamins and stuff like that. Food grade food for humans, and then we're going to make energy as well. Energy and food from the same piece of land. It's never been done before in the world in history.
Talking of food, Victoria on LinkedIn says, how's the Devil's Kitchen going? Are you still planning to get into other supermarkets?
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice question. It's a nicely timed question, because we've had a little bit of kickback from faith schools and people like that around having devil in our name. So, I mean, it's super popular stuff. I mean, we're in 10,000 schools or something. And it's brilliant food and the kids love it. But there are some schools saying, well, we're not so sure about having devil in the name. We went for halal accreditation because, it ticks all of the right boxes.
But the kids don't have to know that, do they, if it's in schools?
I don't think so. And the kids don't see it because it's wholesale catering. It doesn't come in detailed packaging or anything like that. It's just who they pay their bills to. I don't know. Super sensitive. So we're looking for some new names, kicking a couple around. And yeah, we'd like to get it in other supermarkets. And we think we might have come up with a couple of names that would suit something in supermarkets, but it's a really difficult market. You have to pay them to be in it. You have to give them massive cuts of the retail price. What I'm saying is super fine margins. And it's not actually the best place to start. We've seen the rise and fall of numerous vegan brands in the last 3 years that have gone straight into the supermarket channel, been robbed of all their clothes, gone bankrupt, and we don't want to do that.
And this one from Cheryl, who says, come on, Dale, how do we get the government to consider your wealth tax idea?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Well, I said this before, even if you come at it from a kind of capitalist perspective, if you had even a temporary wealth tax for like 2 years above a certain amount, I've never been able to speak to a politician or an economist who's been able to tell me, and I'm not, I don't know how this stuff works. I'm not an economist. Neither is that fellow that was on the panel with you yesterday on any questions, but he didn't have numbers either. So neither have I. So I'm not alone in that respect. But it does seem odd that if you put a tiny amount on, earnings over £300,000 or £500,000, you'd make a shitload of money without really affecting anyone. No one's going to lose their ability to buy food in that pay bracket, if you like.
That's right. And the particular thing I was advocating for was a tax on wealth above £10 million. So if you own stuff, money, buildings, wherever it is, above £10 million, then a 2% rate of tax would apply, which is like £200,000 out of 10 million. Right? You're not really going to miss it. You're not going to not be able to send your kids to school or feed them or something like that. It would only affect 20,000 people in our country of nearly 70 million, and it would raise £24 billion every year, which is a mad sum of money with which we could do great things.
So is there some kind of secret to unlocking why, even the Labour government haven't gone, gosh, shit, that's a good idea, Dale, let's give it a little bit of that. Rachel Reeves at the Dispatch Box doing that on the budget would probably be a bit of a hero with Tories and Labour supporters.
Yeah. Instead of saying bugger the bats and newts, how about, bugger the people with more than 10 million quid, but only just a little bit. We'll just take a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think like you, if we were asking a Conservative government to do this, because, you wouldn't expect them to even consider it. But I would have expected the Labour government might consider it, because it's only about balance in our system, because the more money people have, the less tax they pay, which is how people accumulate wealth, and other people have the opposite situation. Millions of people in our country can't feed themselves, or feed their families rather, and pay their bills and stuff like that. So we have a wealth gap. And it's about trying to rebalance that. And I think, we can either do that through things like equalizing capital gains tax with income tax. So if you make money with money, you pay half the rate of tax where you do if you make money with a pair of hands, if you have a job, for example. That'd be another way to do it. But, we just need some justice in our tax system. And then there's a shit ton of money out there. It's just all in the hands of a few people.
Let's do this. It's X-Rated Corner. These are the ones that aren't always so kind on social media day. Although Lady Loudloo, she sent this to you and to Mike Graham. She says, I think old Jurgen from GB Energy goes to the same barber as Dale Vince. Jurgen is the fellow that's heading up Great British Energy. He's had a bit of stick this week as well because of his other interests, which are energy related. Do you know this fellow, Dale?
Oh, no, I saw his interview, his car crash interview, but I didn't know he had outside interests that were coming under attack.
Yeah. Well, I think a few people on social media have gone, hang on a sec, he owns a wind farm or something like that, you know.
That's no biggie, is it? It's no biggie. But his car crash interview was more important, I think. You know, he's with a Sky supporter in Scotland. He was the Sky reporter in Scotland, I think it was. And he was being pressed on the question of the jobs, how many jobs were coming and when were they coming? And he just was refusing to give a date. And then, you know, it's going to be 1,000 jobs, but he won't say by when, and there's going to be a couple of hundred in the next couple of years, and it was all very disappointing, as the reporter pointed out, compared to the rhetoric, the post-election and pre-election rhetoric about Great British Energy and all that kind of stuff. You know, I mean, very underwhelming, actually, performance and statistics and ambition, it would appear. I don't know.
Here's one from Donga. I think we've had this before. Dale Vince, like him or loathe him, he's British, whereas Elon Musk is South African, Canadian, American, and a
We've had that bit before.
There's some just basic facts in there, right? I mean, there is
I think there's nothing to argue with there.
Yeah.
Especially
whereas Darren Paul has got you down as one of those kind of globalist characters to be held account. Soros, WEF, WHO, central banking, and Dale Vince.
What can I say? Nothing. I'm just.
He includes you in a lot of the biggest conspiracy. Apparently, there's a note from one of our compilers, Will, who says that Darren, who wrote that tweet, actually includes you in quite a lot of the world's biggest conspiracy theories.
Well, I'm flattered.
Whereas Ferric Grove, and I don't know why this comes under X-rated corner, says, I like this Dale Vince bloke. He's clever and sensible. The world needs more clever and sensible right now.
Well, I'm liking this X-rated corner now.
It's great. Yeah, well, indeed. If they're all
I did like it
that.
Actually, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like it doesn't belong there, does it? But, you know, I think there's common sense everywhere. And this is why I, go on Mike Graham's show and, regularly do right-wing stuff. Even on X, right? There are people that have some common sense. That's what I want to say.
And Skier Hughes says, why don't you just reduce the price of your electricity? Why don't you return the subsidies you receive? That'll save a fortune. I bet you know why you won't. It's all money in your pocket, isn't it? Says Skier. How do you respond to that, Dale? You're in the dock now.
All I got is I could just laugh it off. I don't know. I mean, these things are so ridiculous. I mean, we've never had any subsidies, but this comes up all of the time. And, I don't know what to say. I'm just going to shrug.
A shrug is good. It's nonchalant. It's quite cool. It's got something of the Fonz about it.
But sometimes it's really hard to respond to completely stupid things, right?
Yeah, hence the reason why we all search for answers to stupidity, because there really often isn't one, frankly. Dale, that is it for this week. But we are back next week.
Always, aren't we?
We are indeed. You can, of course, follow Dale on social media, twitter.com or x.com/Dale Vince, facebook.com/Dale Vince, or, of course, on TikTok too.
And probably in the Telegraph too.